Commander Jake Morrison sat in his chair on the bridge of the USS Horizon, watching the stars drift past the main screen. It had been 3 weeks since they left Earth's orbital station, and the crew was getting restless. Their mission was simple. Enough. Survey the Kepler 442 system for possible mining operations and check for any signs of life. So far, they had found nothing but empty space and dead rocks. "Commander, I'm picking up something strange," said Pete Collins from his position at the communication station. His voice carried a note of confusion that made Jake sit up straighter in his chair. "What kind of strange, Pete?" "It's a signal, sir, but it's not like anything I've seen before. The pattern is too regular to be natural, but it's not coming from any known source." Jake stood up and walked over to Pete's station. A young officer had been with the ship for 2 years and knew his job well. If he said something was strange, it was worth investigating. "Can you put it on the speakers?" Pete nodded and pressed a few buttons. The bridge filled with a low, pulsing sound that seemed to rise and fall in mathematical patterns. It was unlike any communication signal Jake had ever heard. "Dr. Grant to the bridge, please," Jake said into his communicator. Dr. Lisa Grant arrived within minutes, carrying her tablet and looking alert despite the early hour. She was the ship's expert on alien languages and communication, though she had never actually encountered any aliens in her 5 years aboard the Horizon. "What do we have?" she asked, settling into an empty chair next to Pete. "Listen to this," Pete said, playing the signal again. Lisa's eyes widened as she heard the patterns. She immediately began taking notes on her tablet, her fingers moving quickly across the screen. "This is definitely artificial," she said after a few minutes. "The mathematical progression is too perfect to be natural. But there's something else. The way it repeats, the urgency in the pattern. This isn't a greeting or a beacon. This is a distress call." Jake felt a cold chill run down his spine. "Are you sure?" "As sure as I can be without knowing the source. The pattern repeats every 47 seconds, but each time it gets slightly weaker. Whatever is sending this signal is running out of power. Can you trace where it's coming from?" Pete worked at his station for several minutes, cross-referencing the signal with their navigation systems. "It's coming from the 4th planet in this system, sir. Kepler 442b. Jake turned to his science officer, Lieutenant Roy Barnes. "What do we know about that planet?" Roy pulled up the information on his screen. "It's in the habitable zone, sir. About the same size as Earth, with an atmosphere that should be able to support life. But our long-range scans showed no signs of technology or civilization." "Run a detailed scan now," Jake ordered. As Roy worked at his station, Lisa continued analyzing the signal. She had spread her work across 3 different screens, trying to break down the mathematical patterns into something meaningful. "Commander, I think I found something," she said, her voice tight with excitement and fear. "These numbers here, they keep changing. They start high and get lower with each transmission." "What kind of numbers?" "If I'm right, they're population counts. The signal started with what looks like millions, but the latest transmission shows thousands." The bridge fell silent except for the steady beeping of the ship's systems. Jake felt his stomach drop as the implications hit him. "Science report," he called out. Roy's voice was grim when he answered. "Sir, the planet is dying. The atmosphere is full of toxic gases, the oceans are acidic, and there are massive storm systems covering most of the surface. Whatever happened there, it happened fast. But there are still life signs?" "Faint ones, sir. Concentrated in a few areas that seem to have some kind of artificial protection. Domes or underground structures, maybe." Jake stared at the main screen where the 4th planet appeared as a small dot of light. Somewhere on that world, people were dying. They had sent out a call for help into the vast emptiness of space, hoping against hope that someone would hear them. "Lisa, can you decode any more of the signal?" She had been working frantically at her station, and now she looked up with tears in her eyes. "I think they're sending coordinates, sir. Locations where survivors are gathered. And there's something else, a countdown." "How long?" "Based on the pattern decay, maybe 2 weeks. After that, the signal will be too weak to detect." Jake knew what that meant. In 2 weeks, there would be no one left to send the signal. He walked back to his chair and sat down heavily. The Galactic Council had been very clear about their rules. Humanity was new to the galactic community, and they were expected to follow the non-interference directive. They were not supposed to get involved in the affairs of other species, especially ones that had not achieved space travel. But sitting here, listening to the desperate plea from a dying world, those rules seemed meaningless. "Pete, send a message to Earth Command. Tell them about the signal and request instructions." "Yes, sir." Jake knew that Earth Command would tell them to observe and record, but not to interfere. The message would take 6 hours to reach Earth, and the response would take another 6 hours to come back. By then, thousands more people might be dead on the planet below. "Commander," Lisa said softly, "there's something else. The signal isn't just a distress call. Part of it is a message. It's crude, basic mathematics and simple concepts, but I think they're trying to tell us about themselves." She played a new section of the signal, this one with different patterns. "They're peaceful. They never developed weapons or space travel. They focused on art in harmony with their world. But something went wrong with their technology, and now they can't fix it." Jake closed his eyes and tried to think. Everything in his training told him to wait for orders from Earth, but everything in his heart told him that waiting meant watching an entire species die. "How long to reach the planet?" he asked. "At full speed, 18 hours, answered the navigation officer. "And how many people could we evacuate?" Roy ran some quick calculations. "The Horizon can carry maybe 300 in emergency conditions." "But sir, we don't have the proper equipment for a full evacuation." Jake nodded. "It wouldn't be enough to save them all, but it might be enough to save some. And sometimes, saving some was better than saving none." The signal continued to pulse through the bridge speakers, a desperate voice crying out across the darkness of space. Jake Morrison sat in his command chair and made the decision that would change everything. Jake Morrison stood up from his command chair and looked around the bridge. Every member of his crew was watching him, waiting for his decision. The alien distress call continued to pulse through the speakers, each transmission a little weaker than the last. "Pete, cancel that message to Earth Command," Jake said finally. "Sir?" Pete looked confused. "You heard me. Cancel it. And send messages to the New Montana and the Mercy's Hand. Tell them to meet us at these coordinates immediately." Jake rattled off the location of the dying planet. His crew exchanged glances, but no one questioned his orders. They had served with him long enough to trust his judgment. "Roy, I want you to start working on evacuation procedures. How do we get as many people off that planet as possible?" The science officer nodded and began typing rapidly at his console. "I'll need to know more about their biology first, sir. We can't help them if our life support systems kill them. Lisa, keep working on that signal. I want to know everything we can about these people before we arrive." The next 18 hours passed in a blur of activity. The 3 ships met at the edge of the Kepler 442 system and began their approach to the 4th planet. Captain Sam Rodriguez of the cargo ship New Montana was the first to question Jake's decision. "Jake, you know this goes against every rule in the book," Sam said over the communication link. "Earth Command is going to have our heads for this." "Maybe," Jake replied. "But I'd rather face a court-martial than live with the knowledge that we let an entire species die when we could have helped." Dr. Amy Foster, who commanded the medical ship Mercy's Hand, was more supportive. "My ship is equipped for medical emergencies and refugee transport. We can handle at least 500 people if we pack them in tight." As they got closer to the planet, the full extent of the disaster became clear. The world that had once been green and blue was now brown and gray. Massive storms covered half the surface, and the oceans had turned a sickly yellow color. "My God," whispered Roy as he studied the readings. "The whole ecosystem has collapsed. Their industrial revolution must have gone wrong somehow." Lisa had made progress with the alien signal. "I've learned more about them, Commander. They call themselves the Kethani. They're not like us. They're made of some kind of living crystal. They communicate through sound vibrations, which is why their distress call sounds so musical." "How many are left?" "The latest count shows about 8,000, scattered across 12 different locations. Most are underground or in protective domes." Jake studied the tactical display showing the planet's surface. "We'll start with the largest group and work our way down. Tony, how are our shuttles?" Chief Engineer Tony Blake had been working non-stop to modify their equipment. "I've rigged up temporary life support systems that should work for the crystal beings. It's not perfect, but it should keep them alive during transport." The first shuttle mission was led by Jake himself. He took a small team down to the largest survivor settlement, a dome complex that housed nearly 2,000 Kethani. As they approached the surface, Jake could see the devastation up close. What had once been cities were now twisted ruins covered in toxic dust. The dome was barely holding together, its energy shield flickering weakly. Inside, the Kethani waited. They were beautiful creatures, like living jewels that caught and reflected light in amazing patterns. But Jake could see they were dying. Many of the crystals that made up their bodies were cracked or dim. The leader of the group approached them slowly. When it spoke, its voice was like wind chimes in a gentle breeze. Lisa's translation device converted the musical tones into words. "You came," the being said simply. "We did not think anyone would answer." "We're here to help," Jake replied through the translator. "But we need to move fast. Our ships can't carry everyone at once." "We understand. Take the young ones first. They have the best chance to survive and rebuild our people." The evacuation began immediately. The Kethani was surprisingly easy to transport. Their crystal bodies were light, and they didn't need the same kind of atmosphere that humans did. But they needed specific energy frequencies to stay healthy, and Tony's improvised life support systems were barely adequate. As they worked, more ships appeared in orbit. But these weren't human vessels. "Commander, we have company," Pete reported from the Horizon's bridge. 5 ships, unknown configuration. "They're demanding we stop what we're doing and identify ourselves." Jake's heart sank. The Galactic Council had found them. The lead ship was sleek and silver, clearly built by the Zephyrians who dominated the Council's military forces. Its captain's voice came over the communication channel, cold and formal. "Human vessels, you are in violation of Galactic Law Directive 1847, the Non-Interference Protocol. You will cease your current activities immediately and withdraw from this system." Jake switched to the main communication channel so all his ships could hear. "This is Commander Morrison of the USS Horizon. We are conducting a humanitarian rescue operation in response to a distress call from the planet's inhabitants. The species on this planet has not achieved spaceflight capability. By Council law, they are to be left to develop naturally without outside interference. Your actions constitute a violation of their sovereignty." "Their sovereignty?" Jake couldn't keep the anger out of his voice. "They're all going to be dead in 2 weeks. How is that preserving their sovereignty? That is not relevant to Council law. You will cease your operations immediately or face military action." Jake looked at the tactical display. 5 Council ships against his 3 human vessels. It wasn't much of a contest in terms of raw firepower. But he had something more important than weapons. He had 800 Kethani refugees already aboard his ships, with thousands more waiting on the planet below. Dr. Foster, Sam, are you hearing this? We hear it, Jake, Sam replied grimly. What are your orders? Before Jake could answer, a new voice joined the conversation. One of the HFY they had rescued, an elderly being who introduced himself as the Resonance Keeper, had learned to use their communication system, Council. Ships, the Resonance Keeper said, his musical voice carrying clearly over the channel. We called for help. These humans answered. We choose to go with them. The Zephyrian captain sounded frustrated. You do not understand the implications of this decision. Your species must develop independently. We developed for 3,000 years, the Resonance Keeper replied. We built great cities and created beautiful art. We lived in harmony with our world until we made one terrible mistake. Now we are dying. These humans offer us a chance to live and grow somewhere else. We accept their help willingly. Jake felt a surge of hope. If the HFY were asking for help, then maybe the Council's non-interference rule didn't apply. But the Zephyrian captain wasn't convinced. The law is clear. Human vessels, you have 1 hour to leave this system, or we will use force to stop you. Jake looked at his crew, then at the HFY refugees who were watching the exchange with their glowing crystal eyes. He thought about the thousands still waiting on the planet below, and the choice between following orders and doing what was right. All ships, continue the evacuation, he ordered. We didn't come this far to give up now. The hour deadline passed, and Jake Morrison continued the evacuation. His 3 ships worked around the clock, bringing up shuttle load after shuttle load of HFY refugees. The Council ships held their position, but did not fire. Jake suspected. They were waiting for orders from higher up the chain of command. He was right. Within 6 hours, more ships began arriving in the system. First came 3 more Council vessels from different species. Then a massive transport ship that Jake recognized as belonging to the ancient ethereal collective. Finally, a sleek Earth. Navy destroyer dropped out of hyperspace, followed by Admiral Helen Brooks' flagship. Jake, what have you gotten yourself into? Admiral Brooks asked over a private channel. Her voice was tired but not angry. I'm saving lives, Admiral. That's what we're supposed to do, isn't it? It's complicated, Commander. The Council has called for a formal hearing. They want to put you on trial for violating galactic law. Jake looked out at the dying planet below. His teams had rescued over 3,000 HFY so far, but there were still thousands more waiting. What about the evacuation? That's on hold until the hearing is finished. I'm sorry, Jake, but I have orders. The hearing was held aboard the ethereal ship, a massive vessel that could house representatives from dozens of different species. Jake had never seen so many aliens in one place. There were the silver-skinned Zephyrians with their cold, logical minds, the floating gas-bag creatures called drifters who spoke in bursts of colored light, the rock-like granite, people who moved slowly but thought deeply about everything. At the center of it all sat High Arbiter Kethmer, a Zephyrian who had served on the Council for over 200 years. His silver face showed no emotion as he called the hearing to order. We are here to determine whether the human species has violated Council law by interfering with the natural development of the HFY species, he announced in his mechanical voice. Jake sat at a small table with Admiral Brooks and a Council-appointed defender, a nervous drifter named Whisper of Wind. Across from them sat the prosecution team, led by a stern Zephyrian prosecutor. The facts are simple, the prosecutor began. The humans detected a distress signal from a pre-spaceflight species and chose to intervene. This is a clear violation of Directive 1847, which prohibits interference with developing civilizations. The prosecutor brought up images of the evacuation, showing human shuttles landing on the HFY world. The humans claim they were helping, but the law makes no exceptions for humanitarian crises. If we allow this precedent, it will lead to Chaos as every species decides for itself when interference is justified. Admiral Brooke stood to present humanity's defense. She was an impressive woman in her 60s, with gray hair and sharp eyes that had seen decades of space exploration. Honored arbiters, humanity does not dispute that we intervened. But we question whether the non-interference directive was meant to apply to situations like this. The Cathani were not developing naturally, they were dying. Their entire species was about to become extinct. She activated a holographic display showing the planet's environmental collapse. This was not a natural disaster or a normal part of their development. It was a catastrophic accident that would have killed every living Cathani within weeks. That is irrelevant, the prosecutor replied. The law exists to prevent stronger species from imposing their will on weaker ones. The humans had no right to decide the fate of the Cathani. But we didn't decide their fate, Admiral Brooks shot back. They did. They sent out a distress call asking for help. They chose to come with us when we offered evacuation. This caused a stir among the assembled representatives. The concept of the protected species actively requesting help was something the Council had never dealt with before. High Arbiter Kethmer called for order. The prosecution may present evidence. What? Followed was hours of testimony from Council species about the importance of non-interference. They talked about wars that had been prevented, civilizations that had been allowed to develop in their own unique ways, and the peace that the directive had brought to the galaxy. But then something unexpected happened. Dr. Lisa Grant was called to testify as an expert witness, and she brought evidence that no one had seen before. Honored arbiters, while preparing for this hearing, I researched the history of the non-interference directive. I wanted to understand why it was created and how it had been applied in the past. She activated her own holographic display, showing star charts and historical data. What I found disturbed me deeply. In the past 500 years, the Council has received distress calls from 47 different species facing extinction. All of these calls were ignored under the non-interference directive. The room fell silent as the implications sank in. Lisa continued, her voice growing stronger. 47 entire civilizations died while the Council watched and did nothing. Species that had developed art, literature, science, and philosophy all lost forever because helping them would have been interference. She showed images of dead worlds, planets where archaeological evidence showed the remains of civilizations that had broadcast desperate pleas for help in their final days. The Melody, who created music so beautiful it could make other species cry. The Builders, who constructed cities that were works of art. The Dreamers, who developed a philosophy of peace that could have benefited the entire galaxy. All gone. A representative of the Granite people, a species known for their careful consideration of moral issues, stood up slowly. Are you saying that our law has caused the extinction of intelligent species? I'm saying that the non-interference directive has become a convenient excuse for inaction, Lisa replied. It allows us to feel righteous about doing nothing while civilizations die. The ethereal collective's representative, an ancient being of pure energy, spoke for the first time. Its voice was like the whisper of cosmic wind. The young human speaks truth that we have long ignored. We have valued our principles more than the lives they were meant to protect. The prosecutor tried to regain control of the hearing. These emotional appeals do not change the law. The directive exists for good reasons. Without it, powerful species would dominate and absorb weaker ones. But that's not what happened here, Jake said, finally speaking for himself. We didn't try to control the Kethany or change their culture. We simply offered them a chance to survive. They made the choice to accept our help. High Arbiter Kethmer studied Jake carefully. And if we allow this precedent, what happens next? Do humans become the self-appointed guardians of the galaxy, deciding who lives and who dies? No, Jake replied firmly. We become the species that answers when people cry for help. There's a difference between interference and rescue. Interference is unwanted. Rescue is requested. At that moment, the resonance keeper was brought into the hearing chamber. The elderly Cathani's crystal body still glowed with inner light, though it was dimmer than it had been on his dying world. "I speak for my people," he said through the translation device. "We are grateful to the humans for hearing our call. We did not ask them to change us or control us. We asked them to help us survive. That is not interference. That is compassion." He paused, his musical voice carrying clearly through the chamber. "My people have a saying, a song unheard is not music, and a cry for help unanswered is not civilization. These humans heard our song when no one else would listen." High Arbiter Kethmer looked around the chamber at the dozens of species represented there. For the first time in the hearing, uncertainty showed on his silver face. The law was clear, but so was the moral weight of the humans' actions. "This hearing will recess while the council deliberates," he announced. "We will reconvene in 6 hours with our decision." As the various representatives filed out of the chamber, Jake felt the weight of the galaxy's attention on him. The decision made here would determine not just his fate, but the future of how civilized species treated each other in times of crisis. Commander Jake Morrison stood in the airlock of the human transport ship as it docked with the massive Galactic Council station. The metal walls around him hummed with alien technology that made Earth's best computers look like toys. Through the small window, he could see the station stretching out like a small city floating in space. Ships from dozens of different worlds moved around it like busy insects. Jake had been chosen to lead this mission because he was one of the few humans who could stay calm around aliens. Most people back on Earth still felt nervous when they saw pictures of the council members. Jake understood why. The aliens looked nothing like humans, and some of them were the size of small buildings. Behind him stood the rest of his team. Dr. Lisa Hamilton carried her research equipment in a silver case. She was the smartest person Jake had ever met when it came to alien life. Captain Ryan Torres kept his hand near his weapon, even though they were supposed to be on a peaceful mission. Ambassador Kate Sullivan looked perfectly calm, but Jake could see the worry in her eyes. The airlock opened with a soft hiss. Cool air rushed in, carrying strange smells that reminded Jake of ozone and metal. They walked through corridors that were too wide and too tall for humans. Everything was built for beings much larger than they were. The meeting room was enormous. A circular table sat in the center, big enough to hold 50 humans. Around it sat the members of the Galactic Council. Jake had studied pictures of them, but seeing them in person was different. They were bigger, stranger, and somehow more threatening than any photograph could show. The Zephyrians sat on one side of the table. They looked like living crystals that had been shaped into the form of tall, thin people. Their skin sparkled with inner light, and their eyes glowed like small stars. High Commander Veltar was the largest of them, standing nearly 10 feet tall even while sitting down. His voice sounded like wind chimes when he spoke. On the other side sat the Altarians. They looked like giant slugs covered in slime, but Jake knew they were some of the smartest beings in the galaxy. Their ships could travel faster than anything humans had ever built. Council member Orthgol was their leader. His body was a sickly green color, and his voice made wet, squelching sounds. Jake stepped forward and placed a small device on the table. It projected a hologram showing Earth's request. "Honored council members," he began, "humanity requests mining rights to the asteroid belt around Kepler 442b. We need the rare metals to build our colony ships." High Commander Veltar's crystalline face twisted into what might have been a smile. The sound he made was like breaking glass. "Colony ships," he said. "You mean the ships that run away when real dangers appear?" The other aliens around the table made sounds that Jake realized were laughter. It was not pleasant laughter. It was the kind of laughter bullies made when they found someone weaker than themselves. "I have heard about your recent loss," Valtar continued, his glowing eyes fixed on Jake. "The New Horizon, was it not? 50,000 of your kind, dead because you ran from the Void Reapers instead of fighting them." Jake felt his jaw tighten. The loss of the New Horizon was still fresh in everyone's memory. Families were still mourning their dead. Children were still asking when their parents would come home. "We were trying to protect civilian lives," he said carefully. Council member Orthgo's slug-like body rippled with what passed for laughter among his people. "Protect?" he said, his voice making disgusting wet sounds. "You mean you were too afraid to fight? Real predators do not run from danger, they face it." The Altarian waved one of his slimy appendages, and a hologram appeared above the table. It showed human ships retreating from dark, twisted vessels that seemed to eat light itself. The Void Reapers were the most feared species in the galaxy. They traveled from system to system, consuming everything they found and leaving empty space behind. "Look how your ships flee," Orthgal said, "like small prey animals running from a hunter. This is why your species will never be more than farmers and merchants. You lack the killer instinct." Dr. Hamilton stepped forward. "The Void Reapers have destroyed entire civilizations," she said. "Even council species avoid them when possible." "We avoid them because we are smart enough to pick our battles," Valtar replied. "You avoid them because you are cowards. There is a difference." Captain Torres moved forward, but Jake held up a hand to stop him. Starting a fight here would only make things worse. But Jake could feel anger building in his chest. These aliens sat safely in their council chambers, while humans died trying to build new homes among the stars. "Your request is denied," Valtar announced. "Those mining rights will go to a species with the strength to defend them. Perhaps the Kithans or the Drakmari. Beings who understand that space belongs to predators, not prey." The hologram of retreating human ships played again. This time, other council members joined in the laughter. Jake heard dozens of different alien voices all mocking his species. Some sounded like roaring animals. Others were like the buzzing of giant insects. All of them were making fun of human deaths. "Stick to your little blue world," Orthgal suggested, his voice dripping with mockery. "Leave space exploration to actual predators. The galaxy is too dangerous for soft meat like humans." Ambassador Sullivan finally spoke. Her voice was calm and professional, but Jake could hear the ice underneath. "We thank the Council for their time," she said. "We will inform Earth of your decision." As they walked back through the corridors, Jake could still hear alien laughter echoing behind them. His team said nothing until they were safely back on their ship. Only when the airlock sealed did anyone speak. "Did you record that?" Jake asked. "Every word," Dr. Hamilton replied, patting her equipment case. "Every laugh, every insult, every moment they mocked our dead." Captain Torres was pacing back and forth in the small space. 50,000 people died, and they think it's funny, he said. "They called us soft meat." Ambassador Sullivan sat down heavily in her chair. She looked older than she had that morning. "Earth needs to know about this," she said. "Not just the Council's decision, but their attitude toward us. They don't see us as equals. They see us as prey." Jake stared out the window as their ship pulled away from the Council station. In the distance, he could see the lights of alien ships coming and going. The galaxy was full of predators, according to the Council. Beings who were strong enough to take what they wanted and smart enough to survive in the darkness between stars. What the Council did not know was that Earth had predators too. They had just been sleeping for a very long time. The journey back to Earth took 3 weeks. During that time, news of the Council's mockery spread through human space. Videos of the aliens laughing at human deaths played on every news channel. People were angry, they were hurt. But most of all, They were tired of being seen as weak. Jake watched the reports from his cabin. He thought about the new horizon and the families who would never see their loved ones again. He thought about the aliens laughing at human suffering. And he thought about something his grandfather had once told him about sleeping dogs and what happened when you woke them up. Earth was about to wake up, and the galaxy was going to learn what human predators really looked like.